Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
You are listening to the TrekRanks podcast, a member of the Tricorder Transmissions Podcast Network. This is episode 64, featuring Deep Space Nine Underrated. Welcome, Star Trek fans. I am Jim Moorhouse, and I am the host of the TrekRanks podcast. And tonight, we're continuing our underrated series. Tonight, we're doing our Deep Space Nine Underrated. So, previously back on episode 26, we did our TOS Underrated. And on episode 46, we did Enterprise Underrated. And for this topic, we're not just doing our normal kind of listing our top 5 underrated episodes. Instead, we're going to break it all down with a little more detail than that, but we'll go into all those details on the categories we're selecting in our diagnostic cycle in a couple of minutes. But first up, let's introduce our guests for this week's show. First up, returning for his umpteenth appearance on TrekRanks is Mr. Reliant. It's our favorite, Carlos Miranda. Carlos, it's been too long, buddy. Welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me back on, man. It's been way too long since we tackled that infamous show 47, and we all got together and got to bitch about the things that we love to hate about Star Trek.
Episode 47, the things we can't get over. Our other guest tonight is someone we've been trying to get on the show for a long time. We finally made it work. He's a prolific podcaster himself over at the outstanding Nerd Party Network. It's Mr. Lee Hutchison. Welcome to the show, Lee.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is like one of my favorite Star Trek podcasts, so it's like an absolute pleasure to be talking with you, Jim, and Carlos as well.
That is great to hear. It makes me quite excited. I know you are all over the place. So we usually ask our first-time guests, we like to get their quick Trek origin story, and I want to get that from you too. But before you do all of this great coverage for the Nerd Party on their on these film festivals that take place in London and in Scotland where you live. You have your A24 Project podcast, which is outstanding. How do you get so much time to go to these film festivals? It blows. Every time you go to them, I'm thinking, wow, he'll be there 3 days. No, he's there for like 2 weeks. It's crazy. How does that work, man?
I suppose the one thing that probably works is that you've obviously got an American accent. I have a British, Scottish accent. Is that we have a very generous holiday sort of supply here in the UK when it comes to working laws and so on. And I absolutely take complete advantage of that. So we have the Edinburgh Film Festival, which is based in the city I live. And sometimes, me and my girlfriend, we tend to go kind of to a big holiday every kind of couple of years. And when we don't have an opportunity to go abroad or kind of kick around America for a couple of weeks, I just use it as an excuse to bugger off down to London and enjoy films for a couple of weeks. So yeah, it's a pretty generous holiday package I get in my job, and boy, am I grateful for it.
All right, that is great. I was hoping you were going to say that because that sounds awesome, and the coverage you guys put together is amazing. So let's hear your quick Trek origin story. How'd you get into Trek, Lee?
I'm probably like a lot of kind of British people with how I got into Trek is that I sort of tuned into the BBC show, kind of in and around 5 years old, I think. And I remembered sort of for a birthday, maybe when I was like 5, 6 years old, woke up early before going to school one day. And the presents that I got were my first ever Star Trek presents, my first ever toy and video. And the toy was a Dr. Noonien Singh action figure. God bless Playmates from the 90s for producing all the random toys that they did. And a VHS of Star Trek The Final Frontier. So it's amazing that my Star Trek fandom managed to survive and last as long as it did. Such a strong entry into sort of the toys and video department. But it's just one of those things I just kind of fell in love. I was a bit of a nerdy kid at school, which isn't too surprising either. And I used to sort of run around the playground with my one and only friend in primary school, just like playing Star Trek stories. Like we were always pretending we were fighting the Borg, and he wanted to play with Species 8472, but I always wanted to play Borg stories. So I'm actually surprised I didn't become more of a Voyager fan with that Borg obsession. But yeah, I've just always been a Star Trek fan, and it's just been something I've always loved.
A Dr. Noonien Singh action figure got it all started. That's
such a sad image. Little like 5-year-old Lee with this Dr. Sung like an man action figure.
I love the thought of Noonien Soon being a toy for a little kid because it's so not just this little old guy. All right, let's get into this topic. Going to be a great show. Let's start with our quick TrekRanks recalibration.
What are you recalibrating?
Everything. It's a sweeping, a recalibration of all systems.
First up, as regular listeners will know by now, general order number one here at the TrekRanks podcast is that we love Trek. We love to rank Trek via some deep dive topics just to get the conversation started. And as our good friend, the Vulcan Master, likes to remind us each week, the main driver for all of our discussion here at the TrekRanks podcast is
Infinite diversity.
In infinite combinations.
That's right. No wrong answers. It's not about being right or definitive in any way. It's just about sharing the things that we love about Trek. So we love it all from TOS to TNG, straight through to Enterprise and the Kelvin timeline and now Discovery as well. It's all fair game here on the TrekRanks podcast. And just a reminder that we use episodes as a shorthand term, but the 13 films are always in play as well.
Open hailing frequencies. Hailing frequencies open. On viewer.
And you can find TrekRanks on the interface links at TrekRanks.com, and you can contact me directly on Twitter at TrekRanks or at Enterprise Extra. You can also call and leave us a message with your own picks at 609-512-LLAP at 609-512-5527. Okay, so to wrap that up, Carlos and Lee, why don't you guys let everybody know how they can get a hold of you guys on the net access interface. Carlos.
Really just Twitter. I love Twitter, and I speak to a lot of you guys on Twitter, and my handle is at @DoubleMac, MACC.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter as well at Lee_Nostromo. I also have a sort of Star Trek niche account as well at Star Trek VHS, which is like all the VHS artwork from sort of the UK. And you can find me on my kind of two podcasts, the A24 Project, which looks at filmography of A24, and Filibuster. And we've been kind of lucky enough to have had quite a few Star Trek guests over the years, from sort of like Robert Picardo has been on like twice. We've had Chris Pine, a bunch of other kind of Star Trek actors, and Carlos has joined me for a couple of Star Trek episodes as well. So you can find them wherever you download your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, whatever.
Great work there, Lee. And I forgot to mention the Star Trek VHS Twitter account. I had that in my notes. That I love that account. Super cool. And you're doing a great service for Trek fans out there. If you don't follow that one, you should. It's a lot of fun.
And I don't know what's niche about it. UK VHS coverage from the 80s and 90s.
he branches out, though, from time to time beyond just the UK. All right, I think we're ready now to activate our Level One Diagnostic to get into today's show.
Diagnostic cycle will be complete in 20 seconds.
So we've done this before on our past episodes for Underrated, but this week's diagnostic cycle is going to be it's pretty critical to kind of relay how we're breaking down this topic. So we're not just doing our underrated episodes, like I said at the top of the show. We're categorizing each round in a specific area so we can cover a little more ground. So here's how we're going to break it down for DS9 Underrated. In round 5, we're going to each pick an underrated production design element. So that could be anything like your favorite ship or a prop or costume or musical score or a matte painting or a visual effects shot, whatever you want to highlight. In round 4, we're going to choose our DS9 underrated performer or actor. So this is about both the performance on the screen, but also if you want to highlight the way an actor is off the screen and how he's connected with the fan community or Star Trek in general, or how they live their life, that's great as well. But whoever you think is a little bit unheralded and underrated. Round 3 is the Dabo round, which is perfect for Deep Space Nine. We've always done the Dabo round, and now it fits Deep Space Nine. It's our wild card round, so you can pick anything that you want to highlight that you think is underrated on Deep Space Nine. And round 2 is all about your pick as an underrated character. So you can go big on this with one of the most popular regular main characters, or you can just maybe go with a one-off character, somebody that you think is interesting, that is underrated in terms of Deep Space Nine, however you want to look at it. And round 1 is clear. It's what we do at TrekRanks. It's your most underrated Deep Space Nine episode ever. All right, you guys up to speed on that? All that makes sense?
All good.
All right. And then in our secondary systems, if we got a few outlying picks, we'll We'll go through a few of those. Hey, everyone. I know you're going to enjoy the episode that we have for you today, but I also want to let everyone know that, unfortunately, species GS54 got into our internet relays as we were recording. So there are a few places where the audio for my awesome guest tonight dropped out for like 10 or 15 seconds. And by a few places, I mean that happened like 20 times. So it's really annoying. But there's no way we're going to scrap this episode. So we re-recorded a few bits, and I linked a few of those auditory gaps with some cloaking technology to make it all seamless so that you won't miss any of the great points and picks that Carlos and Lee made in this show. So when you hear a Klingon bird of prey decloaking, don't panic. Just keep on listening, okay? Thanks. All right, I think that sums it up. Let's jump into our Prime Directive.
I do not concur with your captain's decision.
She's following our Prime Directive.
Define Prime Directive.
Now that we have our breakdown, exactly how we're going to create our lists and make our picks, let's figure out how everyone narrowed down their topic. Carlos, how did you break this down so you could come up with just 5 picks for Deep Space Nine Underrated?
To be honest, I listened to the Enterprise one.
Yep.
And I really enjoyed it. So I took some inspiration with some of the direction that people that you guys chose on the Enterprise one. But I also immediately when you sent through the criteria, they were honestly 4 out of the 5 I knew immediately when I was reading it. I just knew exactly what I wanted to talk about. So I didn't really, there's not like a rubric. I didn't really say, okay, this is what I'm going to do about it. I did also listen very quickly to the last few minutes of this is a TrekRanks deep cut. I think the 3rd episode of TrekRanks, which was the first time I was ever on, where we talked about top 5 DS9 recurring characters, right?
Yep.
I listened to that a little bit to make sure that I wasn't going to repeat myself. But yeah, so it's a little bit all over the place. I knew immediately what I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to make sure that I got some inspiration from what had been done before. And also, I didn't want to repeat myself from the last time we talked about DS9.
How about you, Lee? How'd you break it down?
I found this one to be more challenging than I thought it was. That I think, see, if we had done this 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or even when Deep Space Nine was on the go, I think we could have picked even the most popular characters, episodes, ideas, and I think they would have fallen as underrated. But in this sort of for people like myself and others that have, been fans of Deep Space Nine since the beginning, it feels like as every year kind of goes by, as Netflix becomes more popular, as people find Deep Space Nine through the DVDs, things that were underrated before are now kind of considered as, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. And little small characters are now considered, oh, they're up Space Nine. I'm sitting there thinking, well, that's something I'd pick, but oh my God, I just heard someone praising that about Deep Space Nine a few years ago. Oh my God, this episode. But they just did a whole section about that on Deep Space Nine, the documentary.
Yeah. I had the exact same reaction. I'm loving that because we've been talking about doing this topic for, I think we talked about it when we were all at DST in 2018 together, almost a year ago. So I've been looking at this one, and it's ironic that we're doing it right after this documentary comes out.
I think doesn't Ira Bird in the documentary say something like, before, Garak was never heralded as one of the best characters, and now everybody thinks that Garak is the best character.
Yeah, that's the most broad, obvious example. And I think from my end, it was like what Lee was saying, that it was hard. Part of me was thinking I don't think that's underrated anymore. I need to go deeper.
Yeah, but I don't know. I loved Garak when I was watching it, so I was surprised that he said that Garak wasn't a favorite character. I always thought Garak was an amazing character.
Well, to be fair, what he said was that of the recurring characters, I think he framed it recurring characters, that it was all about Gul Dukat when it was airing, and that's true. It was. Everyone would have said Gul Dukat, and then 10 years after, it would switch to Garak. It's all about Garak. Is that?
Garak shot him in the back, man.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I think Lee will be similar in terms of our Prime Directive, but I doubt we're going to be similar on picks. We'll see if there's any duplicates when we get into this. All right. I think we're ready to head into the Denorius Belt and jump into the order of things.
I am a Jem'Hadar. He is a Vorta. It is the order of things.
Just a quick reminder on how we're going to go through the order of things. First, each of us will reveal our 5-word summary and a hashtag for our selections. After that, we'll reveal our pick for each of our underrated topics and the episode in which we think best represents that pick. And then we'll comment about it. And at the end, we'll add a few secondary system selections for the picks that just missed our list. And if we end up having any duplicate picks, another perfect fit for DS9 Underrated, make sure to listen for the Defiant Torpedoes. All right. So, and just a reminder, I always like to say this when we do the underrated episodes. We totally get it. Underrated is in the eye of the beholder. So we're going to pick things that somebody's going to say, oh my God, that's my favorite episode ever. It's my number one thing. And other people are going to say, oh my God, that's so overrated. So we get that. There's no wrong answers. We're just going to have a fun conversation about Deep Space Nine. All right, Carlos, we're going to start with you, man. Round 5, Deep Space Nine, underrated production design element. What do you have?
So this is one of the ones that I knew immediately what I wanted to talk about. So my 5 words, right, are functional workhorses of Starfleet. And my hashtag is I want to ride where I like. So here's why I'm choosing Starfleet runabouts. So basically, I feel like when we talk about Starfleet aesthetics and Starfleet ships, which I am the biggest fan of, we never talk about runabouts. And really, I think the runabouts were the last great, like, very angular, boxy design that we got of Starfleet. If you really think about it, everything after runabouts were far more organic. Think of the Defiant, far sleeker, smoother lines, almost circular. Things like Voyager, the Delta Flyer, the Enterprise E. Like, they're all amazing designs. I love every single one of those designs. But the runabout, Rick Sternbach, they went on to do everything else that they designed after this was that kind of organic, more, more the sleeker, rounder ships like the Voyager, DS9, Delta Flyer. But I think the runabouts are this beautiful, very kind of utilitarian, boxy design that we never got again. We love about Deep Space Nine happened because or in a runabout. So I really thought that right off the bat, when I saw production design element, DS9 Underrated, I had to go with runabouts.
I love that pick. Is there an episode you picked to associate it with?
I thought about this, and honestly, not really. I feel like there are. I was looking at Memory Alpha, and they're basically in like over 100 episodes of DS9.
So that's why I have you pick one. I just like having episodes. So
no, fair enough. But one little ship. There's so many. I love Picard's line about delivering runabouts from the Enterprise. I think that there's so the Jem'Hadar with Nog and Jake. So many great scenes happen on that set of the runabout, and I don't really love that they deserve.
All right, well, now your pick is one last ship because that's the first one you said, and that's an awesome pick. And by the way, it was on my secondary systems. So, Lee, what's your take on runabouts?
Yeah, I quite enjoy them. When Carlos was kind of waxing lyrical about them there, I was thinking of when sort of Bashir sort of sheepishly goes in the Jem'Hadar. But we have runabouts that we can take into the Gamma Quadrant, and then the captain's like, I think the Jem'Hadar will have a bit more teeth about them. And it's just like this sort of immediate slap down of the runabouts. As soon as there's this new villain in town, and straight away, the Next Generation, they were big and chunky. Then they were sort of a bit more streamlined and almost like emergency escape pods. Whereas when we saw these shuttles, it felt like that is a realistic shuttle in the 24th century. And I always particularly enjoyed them.
Yeah, totally agree.
Timescape, because Timescape is the only episode, obviously, where runabouts appear on TNG. But even though they're in hundreds of episodes, in 100 and something episodes of DS9, the only time you ever see the back of a runabout was in Timescape.
I know. It's a really interesting piece of trivia. Okay, Lee, what's your production design element?
So my 5-word summary is the Defiant's tough little quarters, hashtag cattle class, and I've gone with the Defiant quarters. So Star Trek always pretends that it's some sort of Navy show, even though that's barely been represented on screen. Yeah, you could argue something like Wrath of Khan from the Nick Meyer era, that sort of moved towards the Navy element. But the original series, you've got this like bright purple ship, your bright colorful ship. It's this kind of fun retro kind of ship in space. And then we get that kind of feel of it in sort of the Star Trek movies. But again, the quarters seem pretty funky. We have Spock's room, which is quite big. It's got its sort of little tassels, all those sorts of things. And then we kind of maybe see a bit with the Excelsior ship that they sort of have these bunk beds. Then we get into the Next Generation. Again, it's sort of like a nice hotel in space. And Deep Space Nine, yeah, we kind of got that feeling. This is a space station. But with like the Defiant, even though it was that small ship, I love that it kind of went back to that sort of Navy element. Like there's no comfort, there's no special kind of parts about this. You are space for a ship like that. It feels like it ties into what Starfleet realistically is. I was watching some Voyager recently and I was thinking, the ship isn't the biggest. It's got so many kind of decks and levels, 137 or give or take kind of crew. And then they've still got quite big, spacious rooms. The reality is they should look in and around like the Defiant. And I think that I really like that sort of choice. And the fact that Worf went and lived in the Defiant quarter seemed like a really good idea. It was such a great character plot and design. And I just think the Defiant quarters are one of the underrated production design elements of the show.
And the Defiant quarters, you literally can't even sit on the bottom bunk without having to lean forward without bonking your head. It's hilarious. I love that pick. That is a deep cut. Did you have an episode that you associated it with?
I always think of the one, as I say, where Worf goes off and lives on the Defiant, basically, and there he is listening to his like classic music that you just can't live on a space station. And I like that. It's Worf got a lot of great character development in the Next Generation, perhaps more than others. But it's just little touches like that where it's like, they had no reason to move him out of the space station onto the Defiant, but it made sense for the character and at that time. And I think it was a thing that put a smile on his face, and that's always a good thing.
Carlos, what's your take?
That's a phenomenon about, basically the state of humanity, and it happens in one of these tight quarters. And I think you're right. I've never understood anyone that doesn't think of Starfleet as the Navy. And I think that your point about how luxurious the Enterprise D in particular quarters are, and Voyager's quarters, especially their crew quarters, should have been a lot more akin to the Defiant. So I think it's a fun pick. It's something that I had never really given much thought about, but it makes a lot of sense, in particular in the context of viewing Starfleet through the lens of a 24th century Navy.
I love that. I'm going to go to my pick because it's funny. We've done this kind of production design round for different topics through TrekRanks history, but we've never had all three people choose set design elements, and I also have a set design element. So my pick is 5 words and a hashtag, Deep Space Nine's unique bridge, hashtag 360 set for the ages, and it is the Ops Station on Terok Nor, the design of Deep Space Nine's Operations Center. I chose the circle as my episode where they really showcased it well with some amazing shots of Kira when she's walking in to say goodbye. Everything's shot by the director Corey Allen from down low, looking up so you can see the ceiling and the nature of this thing. And everyone always talks about the Promenade being one of the biggest and best sets in Trek history, and it totally obviously is. And the production design on it with all the Cardassian elements is amazing. But what you don't hear a lot of is this ops design, which is like, it's 360. It's super vertical in how it was built. It has all those amazing Cardassian nooks and crannies. And I can't remember the episode, but they have that. There's that moment where they talk about where Sisko's offices was designed by the Cardassians. So they're looking up at the prefect or the goal in the office. And yeah, I just love the way they light it. I just love that set every time they're shooting on it. Lee, what's your thought on that one?
Yeah, I think it's the best bridge of the whole bunch. And I think that's the joy of sort of everything about kind of Deep Space Nine in terms of how it's been constructed, is that it's not just like, oh, how would a bridge look like in the 24th century? It's like, what would something look like in the 24th century? But most importantly, how can we film it and make sure that we can produce a really good, visually interesting television show, and we're never sort of repeating a lot? so cool that there's still this little element sometimes that they can dive into. You know, you see a lot of the bridges and it's like it's there all on the screen, but there's still so many nooks and crannies that they could kind of discover and play with over the 7 years. And I think that's a testament to the production design.
And plus that turbo lift right in the middle of the set going up and down.
That's what I was going to say. The turbo lift, like the transporter pad. Like, I love, I mean, in Emissary when O'Brien kicks the control and then Odo beams right into the transporter pad on the bridge. I mean, on Ops, it's so. Yeah, and you just get the sense that Ops really is the nerve center, like the nucleus of this amazingly large and very complex world that is Deep Space Nine. I remember there's this one episode in particular. I think it's season 7 towards the end. I could be wrong though. I'm sure somebody on Twitter can correct us. But there's an episode, and I want to say it's like Bashir and maybe Dax are having a conversation. And just in the background, like you just have a random guy that beams into Ops with like a pad and then walks over to somebody. And you just get a sense, the camera doesn't focus on it. It just happens in the background, but you just really get a sense that this is a working, living environment. And there's all these other stories and all these other things happening on Deep Space Nine that, the story just doesn't happen to focus on. So one of the things that I love about Ops is that there's so much more going on than just the story that it's focused on, especially when you compare it to Starships where you just kind of have, like you think of the Enterprise or on Voyager where you have the camera is focused specifically on the actor speaking, or it's a close-up. In Ops, because the set is so large and so I don't want to say convoluted, but there's always something else going on in the background. And, to I think Lee's point, there's multi different levels and things are happening on different, at different heights. And it's just enormous. Really makes you feel like this is the nerve center of this massive space station.
That's awesome. It rings a bell, but I'm going to have to look for that again.
Someone on Twitter will definitely know.
Yes. Let's hear it.
Yeah, definitely.
By the way, Lee's episode was Bar Association when he moved from the Defiant, or from Deep Space Nine onto the Defiant. All right, let's go to round 4. Carlos, what is your pick for DS9 Underrated Performer?
All right, so my 5 words are emotional and powerful guest star. My hashtag is I want candy, and it's the one and only Tony Todd.
Ooh.
Because he plays the older Jake Sisko in one of the greatest episodes of Deep Space Nine, and he's also Kern in one of the best DS9 episodes, I think, for Worf. So I just think that, when we think of performers and when we think of actors, the troupe of guest stars in DS9 is by far the biggest. It's amazing. Everyone, we all love Nog and Rom, Lita, General Martog, Gowron. There's the female changeling, Wayun. There's so many, but actually we don't really think of Tony Todd, and partly it's in 6 episodes of the entire franchise, right? 3 TNG, 2 DS9, and 1 Voyager. So one, it's great that he was in the big 3 in the 3 shows of the 90s, but I just think that he's extremely underrated. He is, his character is such an important plot point to in TNG. He's so important to the character of Worf. He's in one of my all-time favorite episodes of TNG in Sins of the Father, and in one of the top 10 episodes by anybody's account of DS9 when The Visitor. So I think that Tony Todd deserves his due. It was him. That was it.
So did you pick The Visitor or Sons of Moog as your episode?
I think I'm going to go with Sons of Moog because...
All right. Deep cut.
Because it's a little bit more of a deep cut and underrated, but it's also because it really does continue and to a certain degree brings that Kern storyline to a very tragic, when you think about it,
yes,
a tragic end.
Lee, what's your take on Tony Todd?
He was someone I'd really considered for my one. I think almost a testament to Tony Todd's performance, especially in The Visitor as well. It's considered one of the all-time great episodes of Deep Space Nine, is that it is a quieter episode. Hey, we're going to have some of the cast, they're kind of there in the beginning, and then we've got Tony Todd kind of carrying the episode. And the fact that this episode has made it as to one of the all-time special episodes for a lot of the fans is really testament to Tony Todd's performance. It's not Cirroc Lofton we're getting as Jake Sisko here. It's Tony Todd, and we owe him. I think the success of that show all relies on him.
Yeah, Tony Todd is never the wrong answer. He is epic and legendary. Love him. All right, Lee, what is your round 4 pick for underrated DS9 performer?
So my 5-word summary is Mila, she knew too much, and hashtag mum's the word. So think of like the end of Deep Space Nine. You know, I want you to kind of think of when you watch What We Left Behind, What We Leave Behind for the first time. And it's like, here we go, the title cards. We're on Cardassia. And then we spend the next 5 minutes going through, and special guest star Barry Ross, and J.G. Hertzler, and Jeffrey Combs. Mm-hmm. And in there we've got Julianne McCarthy. And that's someone that is like one of the sort of smaller names of sort of the Deep Space Nine kind of canon, that like when you're looking at all those names sort of at and, you know, in the finale, we have Sisko. He's poofed away off with the emissaries and the prophets. We have Weyoun finally killed off one of the great sinister villains. Damar, he's gone from an absolute terrible human being to, you know, this rebellion leader. You know, there's death, despair, the end of a war. But I always find that when Garak's mom has been killed and she's just flung down the stairs, that always hits hard. That we have this sort of old woman that survived sort of different kind of political landscapes in Deep Space Nine on Cardassia. She's been the husband of a treacherous, you know, Obsidian Order kind of guy. You know, her son is a traitor. You know, all these different things, and she has survived. The fact that she made such a late entrance into Deep Space Nine, and she made such a kind of impact on me emotionally, and I think on the characters. You know, it's when you hear that they're wiping out all these Cardassians all around the planet, and it's making the way out to the front lines. You know, a lot of these characters and the damage, we're just having to hear about it. But when we think about poor Mila being kicked down the stairs after being shot by the Jem'Hadar, it really packs a punch, and you can imagine why those Cardassians just turn those ships around and just start blasting away at the Dominion.
I'm going to need a minute, because that scene with Mila is absolutely devastating. And I've always thought of it as being a visual representation of all those cities being dusted, because it literally was an old lady being thrown down the stairs dead. And like you said, she survived it all. She was there, and I can't remember her first episode, but it was pretty early. So,
Carlos,
what's your take on Mila? Yeah, I think that's right.
I mean, I think it's a great pick. Garak has always been, you know, depending on the day that you're asking me, either my number 1 or number 2 favorite Deep Space Nine character, between Kira and Garak always. And I think that this is Mila's one of these characters that serves to deepen one of the characters we love, in this case Garak. And I think it's an inspired pick, Lee.
I love it. I meant to say, what'd you think of Julianne McCarthy, not Mila, of course, but as it's her performance was special as well. Okay, let's close out round 4 with my round 4 pick for underrated DS9 performer. And this is definitely my broadest, most obvious pick. I did pick a series regular, and I'll explain why in a minute. 5 words and a hashtag. The key ingredient is Terry. Hashtag revenge best served with Dax. The episode is Blood Oath, and of course it is Terry Farrell as Jadzia Dax. And I know everyone loves Jadzia, and I know everyone loves Terry Farrell, but I feel like what Terry Farrell accomplished in portraying Dax is really underrated. I think this DS9 documentary helped me think about it in these terms, because she was one of the last people cast on Deep Space Nine, and she had this modeling background, and they were having trouble kind of figuring out this character from the look to how it was going to be this wise old man and old friend of Sisko. And you get on set and you hear these stories of Avery Brooks and just how intense he is and what he brings to these scenes. And it really struck me when Terry Farrell said that in this documentary, What We Left Behind, that she had to really work with him on letting her be this veteran and having him not kind of overpower her, so she could be this old influential friend despite the way that he dominates a screen. And she did that. She salvaged it. She made it all work. And we know that there was a slightly stilted beginning for Jadzia in terms of like the first 1 or 2 seasons. And then all the things that make Jadzia work that's what Terry Farrell brought to the character, making it fun and sexy and powerful and sarcastic. She's amazing. I think what she did to make that character her own is what people really react to when they love that character. So
It's in their own best interest to join the war. That's the key. That's the reason the Romulans will finally take action. Not to do us any favors, but to protect themselves from the Dominion.
Okay. Let's say I'm the Romulan proconsul. From where I'm sitting, the Dominion isn't a threat to me. I have a non-aggression pact with them. They are my allies.
You're not going to put your faith in some piece of paper, are you?
Not at all. I've been watching them very closely since the beginning of the war, and so far, they've kept their part of the bargain.
They're violating your territory almost every day. What kind of an ally is that?
So they're crossing my backyard to give the Federation a bloody nose. I can't say that makes me feel very sad.
You can't be naive enough to think that the Dominion is going to stop with the Federation. When they're finished with us, they're coming after you.
That's speculation.
The Founders see it as their sacred duty to bring order to the galaxy. Their order. Do you think they'll sit idly by while you keep your chaotic empire right next to their perfect order? No. If you watch us go under, then what you're really doing is signing your own death warrant.
But before I plunge my people into a conflict that will kill millions of loyal Romulan citizens, I need something more concrete than the self-serving argument of a Starfleet officer. I need proof of Dominion duplicity. Not more words. Proof.
Very good, old man. You would have made a decent Romulan.
So that's why I picked Terry Farrell. Lee, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I love Terry. I think that documentary is such a great advert for why she's so special. And I always remember just like when that character was killed off. I was on holiday at the time. I was over in Florida, and I was there at Disneyland. And like the previous episode, The Sound of Her Voice was on TV, and then it like had this advert afterwards, like, in the next episode, one of Sisko's closest friends will die. Who will it be, basically? And I remembered watching that episode live and being absolutely heartbroken because she was like the coolest character when you were like a young Deep Space Nine fan and sort of you're 10 years old. She was sexy. She had like kicked ass. There wasn't sort of many kind of characters like her. Kira was similar, but it was just...
Yeah, it was really well done. Carlos.
Point about Blood Oath too. I think Blood Oath, there's Jadzia pre-Blood Oath and then Jadzia post-Blood Oath.
Mm-hmm.
I think post-Blood Oath, that Jadzia, that's when she really comes into her own and becomes, a proper, like action star, which is part of what we love the character. I think she's sexy, she's incredibly smart, but she's also, she can go toe-to-toe with the Klingons and fight right alongside them, right?
Yep.
And to your point about Terry, I feel like, whenever you meet Terry Farrell, you see her at a convention or you talk to her and things like that, you get the sense, and this is going to seem like a backhanded compliment. It's not like she's Dax. Like you could see that.
Yep, that's a great way to frame it, and it's true. And it sounds like a backhanded compliment, but it's not.
Yeah, not at all.
It makes perfect sense.
It was the only reason I watched Becker for 2 seasons.
Right. That was so sad. I had no idea she was going to die, so I hadn't seen the previews. I don't watch previews, and I hadn't read any of the trade reports or anything. I was barely on the internet at that point, so it floored me that she died. All right, let's move to the Dabo round 3. Carlos, what's your wild card pick?
All right, so my 5 words are for fans in the know, and my hashtag is I started a joke, and my pick is self-sealing stem bolts.
Oh, I love it. I really thought this was going to be Vilix Prong or whatever his name is.
I will bring Vilix Pratt into this, but it is self-sealing stem bolts. I think that, and I have talked about this on the show in the past, but I think that DS9 has done inside jokes in a way that no other Trek show to date, and I'm saying including Discovery, really does inside jokes. Yes, you can point to Easter eggs like the use of the number 47 and things like that, but really DS9, the writers were funny, and you get a sense, in talking about the documentary, you get a sense that they really but there was a lot of camaraderie in the room. They really enjoyed each other, right? And that sense of kind of friendship and fellowship really ran almost the entire 7 seasons. And I think the self-stealing stem bolts, every single time that they needed a reference for a MacGuffin or something, it was self-stealing stem bolts. And then it was, Captain Baudet and Vilix Pran and Morn and Yamak Sauce. And like these things that were just always peppered throughout. And if you're just a casual fan of the show, you don't really think anything of it. But it's such a wink to the audience of like, for the fans in the know, that Captain Baudet has gone on dates with Kira and Ezri and Jadzia. And that Vilix Pran gets weirder every single time that they describe him. And, how many times do they Yamak Sauce? It's just, I think the stem bolts symbolize a sense of quirkiness and fun that is lacking. And it's not necessarily a value judgment, but I just think it's kind of lacking in all other Trek series.
All right, please tell me the episode you picked is The Storyteller.
It is The Storyteller.
Yeah.
No, it's not The Storyteller.
Come on.
I picked is, I don't want to give you that satisfaction. The episode I picked was really What You Leave Behind, because even though that's really not underrated DS9, there's that great line from Bashir when he's like, it's a last reference of Stemble. He's like, someone has to teach his cadets the difference between, or plasma something and self-sealing stem bolts.
That's beautiful. Beautiful pick. Lee, any take on self-sealing stem bolts?
I think like only TrekRanks could have a round dedicated to that. Like I take my hand off to you, Carla.
I love that pick. All right, Lee, what's your wild card pick?
So my 5-word summary for the wildcard Dabo round: Command and Conquer video screens, #wargames. That's the infographics. I love the infographics, and especially these ones with the war element.
Yes!
I like how we have this galactic war playing out, and we have these screens with like the Federation are here, the Klingons are here, the Dominion lines are here. I just love that stuff. And it's honestly, I wish it was a bit more animated. That's my only thing. They're a bit static. But I just love looking at it going, ooh, we saw a lot of action in Deep Space Nine, but the reality is we couldn't sort of visualize an entire war and where everything was and the chess pieces of it all. And just, I love it that, we see in the Cardassian kind of central command, we see the screens where the lines are, what's happening in the Jimkata system. Like when we've got the Klingon room on Deep Space Nine where they all have just there on the screen. Sometimes people refer to it, sometimes it's just there in the background, but I just love the idea of this like galactic war, and it's just playing out on these computer screens. I love it. It's just that little small cut that, we don't really often get that in Star Trek. Balance of Terror, yes, but very little kind of since that then has ever kind of shown those kind of cool action infographics of a galactic war unfolding.
I love that. I was actually going to have in my secondary system a shout out to the Cardassian graphic screens. So I'll say it here because I love those circular kind of graphic screens where they have information being portrayed there. Carlos, what's your take on that pick?
I love it. In fact, I follow multiple Twitter accounts that are only devoted to kind of graphics and of sci-fi movies and TV shows, like Sci-Fi GUI and Blind, like the company that does a lot of them, Blind. If you don't follow those accounts, you should. And all they do is highlight exactly what Lee's talked about. And I think that's a phenomenal pick, and something that I might reference a little bit later on.
Ooh.
I will be following those accounts as soon as we get done recording because those sound awesome.
Yeah, send those to me as well, Carlos.
I will. All right,
I'm going to jump in with my wildcard round pick, but before I do, a few guests we've had before have done this trick on TrekRanks, and I'm doing it for the first time. It's a little bit of a cheat, but I love it. I don't care. 5 words and a hashtag. From Circle to the Dominion, hashtag Season 2 is the never-ending sacrifice, and it is the entirety of Season 2 of Deep Space Nine. I am declaring it to be incredibly underrated. The episode I'm picking is The Wire, which gives us some amazing backstory on Garrick that really at that point no one even knew they needed, about a season and a half into Deep Space Nine, but it was just this incredible first kind of look at Garrick and what was really happening with that character. But let me just rattle off. We have the Circle trilogy, the first ever 3-parter. You have the Maquis mentioned and continued in a couple of storylines. You have the Maquis Part 1 and Part 2, and obviously it launched a whole series with Voyager. Necessary Evil is this amazing film noir that shows in Necessary Evil, you actually see Odo meeting Kira, Gul Dukat, Quark. He meets all 3 of them in this episode, and you see it. You also see Gul Dukat meet Kira. Crossover is the relaunch of the Mirror Universe. Blood Oath is the return of TOS Klingons. Armageddon Game, Whispers, Paradise, Cardassians, a super underrated episode. And it all closes with the Jem'Hadar and the launch of the Dominion, which had been mentioned before in Rules of Acquisition and other episodes. So there is Anabran Tain is created in season 2. There is so much going on in this episode. I just love it in this season. I love it. I think it's underrated. I don't think it gets nearly enough credit when people talk about that kind of thing. And a little surprise, a little spoiler alert, of all the episodes I've mentioned here in season 2, I purposefully did not mention one for reasons that will become clear shortly. So, Carlos, what's your take on season 2?
Okay, so I almost did this because I don't remember who it was, and
it was Dana Kennedy picked season 1 of Enterprise.
I thought that was a really interesting approach. And a couple of years ago, I wrote an article for Trek News about how underrated and amazing season 2 of Deep Space Nine is.
Oh, that's awesome. I forgot about that. I'm sure I read it. I didn't remember that.
I'm sure you have read it. I'm sure I sent it to you before I published it. And I wrote an entire blog about it. And in fact, it was, I think, aside from the piece that I wrote on Gene Kuhn, the piece on the blog about season 2 of DS9 is by far the thing that I've ever written about Star Trek that has gotten the most traction. I mean, Robert Hewlett-Wolf commented on it, like a ton of people, like, that it maneuvered all the pieces on the board in such a way that then could be built on. All of those episodes, the Jem'Hadar, The Wire, Crossover, Blood Oath. I mean, those are those are amazing episodes of Star Trek. Full stop. I was going
to stop you right there because you can't frame it any better than saying it maneuvered all those pieces onto the board of what became the fabric of Deep Space Nine's continuity and storytelling. It's amazing.
Should I leave now?
Well said, sir. Do you have any more points? All right, Lee, how about you? Season 2.
Follow that, Lee. Follow that.
I recently watched a few episodes from season 2 lately, and the one episode that kind of stood out for me in a bit of a rewatch was Blood Oath. I haven't watched that one in maybe a decade or so, or since I bought the DVDs. And I always had it in my head that like it's this big action epic that is like almost half of it is like blood and battles, etc. When I kind of revisited, I'd kind of forgotten that was only like the last 5 or 6 minutes of the episode. Like it's this beautiful meditation of what it means to make an oath, and are you the person that makes that? And sort of, it's a really great Trill story. And, we all think about the kind of the Klingon entries, but I think we learn so much about what it means to be a Trill and the obligations and the life that we don't get in many other Trill episodes. And I think it's an all-time classic, and one I had such a great time revisiting. And, I think it's an absolute classic.
Yeah. Well said. Blood Oath is amazing. I don't think I've gone 10 months without watching Blood Oath, let alone a decade. All right, let's go to round 2. Most underrated Deep Space Nine character. Carlos, what's your pick?
So 5 words. You remember, don't you, Elam? Hashtag Papa Don't Preach. My most underrated character is Enabran Tain.
Oh, I love this pick.
I love how we've both gone over 2 different rounds. We've given him his family.
Oh, that's great. Yes. So good.
Totally. I mean, I think that Tain is only in 4 episodes. We're obviously introduced, as we just discussed, in The Wire, a season 2 episode. But he's only in 4 episodes. Yet, like Kern, which I talked about a little bit earlier, Tain just looms over basically, all of Deep Space Nine, especially from the point of view of Garrick, right? He's a character that's only in 4 episodes, and those, The Wire, Improbable Cause, The Die Is Cast, and Purgatory Shadow, and those 4 episodes. I mean, those would make the top 20 list of any Deep Space Nine fan, episodes.
Pretty sure they're all in the. No, I think they're in the top 25 for TrekRanks.
Yeah, but they're still. I mean, here's a character that was supposed to be a one-off, by the way, right?
Right.
But he just the way he delivers his lines, he's ruthless, he's calculating. If you take Garak out of the picture, there are very few characters in all of the Star Trek franchise that you talking about from a season 2 perspective, right? And so I just think that he doesn't make a lot of people's kind of list of characters, and so I thought for that he was. He's a little bit underrated, but he's an amazing character that made his mark with only 4 appearances.
All I ask is that for this moment, let me be your son.
Elim, remember that day in the country? You must have been almost 5.
How can I forget it? It was the only day.
I can still see you. On the back of that riding hound. You must have fallen off 12 times. But you never gave up.
I remember limping home. You held my hand.
I was very proud of you. That day.
All right, awesome. Which episode did you pick of those 4?
I'm going to have to go with the Die Is Cast.
Okay. Top 10 episode.
Oh, yeah.
Lee, what's your take on a Nabrantane?
Yeah, that was so close for me. And in Purgatory's Shadow, the Die Is Cast there, he's the Gamma Quadrant, and they're just like, just admit that you're my dad. And I just love that sort of dynamic. And when you said, oh, this was just meant to be a one-off character, I'd love to know how many, if we just sat down and did it, how many one-off characters in Deep Space Nine went on to have more than another appearance, or to become a multiple part, or even to become sort of semi-regular. I would love to know how many people did that. But Elam, it's just an all-time great character. Great choice, Carlos.
I love this pick, Carlos. I actually had Paul Dooley on my secondary systems as performer. He's actually one of my favorite actors from when I was a kid. He's in a bunch of great stuff. And for anyone who saw Breaking Away, I'm just going to do what I always do. Refund! Great movie. Okay, Lee, what is your number 2 pick, most underrated Deep Space Nine character?
Yeah, so my 5-word summary is before the Cardassian Bajoran spy and #welcome Martha. And I've gone with Sub-Commander Tarul from the Deep Space Nine 2-parter, The Search, Part 1 and 2. So
this is a deep cut, and I love it.
So think of it. What kind of alien race gets introduced into Deep Space Nine for the first time in The Search, Part 1? That would be a really good pub quiz question. Some people might go, oh, was it the Jem'Hadar? No, that was in the previous episode. Oh, of course it was the founders. We get to meet them at the end of the episode. Yep, that is also true. But the Romulans make their first appearance here in Deep Space Nine in the form of Tarul. And what I like about this is that it's a really interesting way of elevating the Dominion straight away. We've had this one device and come on this mission, sort of shows to me, well, if the Romulans could get involved, if this is something that's like, it's not just the Federation, the Federation, the Vulcans, all the kind of, shiny, happy people of the Federation that get involved. The Romulans want to get involved, and they're going to send someone on their ship on this mission. I just think that really adds something to it. And it sort of makes the world bigger than just the Federation and the human side. I really like that sort of introduction. And again, it sort of sets up as well that this is a species that are going to become very involved in the Dominion War later on in the season, when they sort of have their attempt with the Cardassians to wipe out the Dominion, then the non-aggression pact, and then they're involved.
Yeah, I just want to say I love Martha Hackett who played Tyrol, who is obviously Seska, one of my all-time favorite characters on Voyager. So this is an inspired deep cut pick. I love it. Carlos, what's your take?
No, I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, every time I think about her as a character, you really think about Seska, right? Because that's Martha really is at the end of Star Trek. But it's an inspired. I think it's an inspired choice, Lee, and I also think your point about it bringing the Romulans into the fold for this mission does start opening up the world. Because I mean, the thing about DS9 is that DS9 paints a much larger world than a lot of the other shows, and I think it's because of things like this that it paints towards a much larger world that's out there, and that we will be, that all of us will be in the same boat soon enough.
Fantastic pick. All right, let's close out round 2 with my pick. 5 words and a hashtag. Cardassian shot in his underwear. Hashtag the legend of the Jets and the Sharks. And it is Lee Nollis, played by Richard Bamer from the episode The Homecoming at the beginning of season 2. I love this character. A little bit of a deep cut, but I really love what he represents. I love the way he's portrayed by Richard Bamer. I was really bummed when he died at the end, but there's one scene between him and Sisko that I just want to call out that I thought was just so special when he tells him that he's not really a war hero. He just happened to kill this Cardassian in his underwear, and everyone kind of turned him into it. And he says to Sisko, I would die for my people. And Sisko's like, yeah, of course you would. That's the easy thing to do. Would you live for your people and be the hero that they need? And I love that moment at the beginning of season 2. I also love this moment when he's trying to clear out the airlock when all the Bajorans are panicking and trying to get off the station. He's telling them, we are not leaving. We need to stay here. This is our deal, and it's the Federation people that need to get out of here. He's got a great death scene. There's just so much about this character that I love in this 3-parter, and of course my hashtag is from Richard Bamer being also the star of West Side Story, which is kind of an amazing full circle for this actor. So, Lee, what's your take on Lee Nollis?
Yeah, I like the character of Lee Nollis on paper, and I've kind of had to retrospectively reassess how I think of him. I think of Lee Nollis as quite a dull, uninspiring character on Deep Space Nine. I think he's better written, and the idea behind him is more interesting than what's presented on screen. His storyline, kind of the plot where he's going, really interesting, but I just find the man himself a bit bland and a bit dull. But then I started to think to myself, but isn't that kind of the point, that he's just this kind of generic guy that's just been sort of flung into this sort of hero worship, and then he sort of found himself in a job that he probably has no interest in doing. He's just been in a camp for decades, and now he's like, oh, I've got to go work on a space station. When go let the guy chill out, hang out with an orb or something like that. And I just kind of think that's the canon I've made with it in my head. Instead of being maybe critical about the performance, or maybe the character could be a little bit better, that it's just he's just a kind of generic, boring guy that's just...
Well, the thing I like about that is this scene with O'Brien, when at the end, midway through the 3rd episode, when O'Brien turns to Sisko and he's like, everyone talks about this guy like he's some big war hero, larger than life, and this leader, but he's just I don't see that. He just seems like a regular dude who's not that capable. And Sisko's like, yeah, he's a war hero. Deal with it, knowing the truth. So I think that kind of fits your critique a little bit. Carlos, how about you?
Yeah, I always really like this character for the same reasons that Lee does not. I think Lee's just mad that he shares his name with a boring Star Trek character.
Wait until you find out my nickname was Hutch in high school, and imagine sharing a nickname with a guy like that from the next generation.
That's great.
Luckily, no one really knew who that is, Lee, so don't worry about it. Who found himself in a situation, and this myth became, this legend, and this myth was kind of thrust upon him. Was really, really interesting, and the fact that I think he was kind of melancholy and a little bit on on the, you know, like low energy, let's put it that way, is because he, you know, he was in a camp, in a forced labor camp for most of his life. So I just think he's a great character. I love his conversation with Cisco. You know, that this whole idea is that we ultimately what we are the, you know, that whole argument that we are what people say about us, and the stories that people tell about us when we're gone is just an interesting play on that character.
That's a really great observation. Another good one, Carlos. Okay, let's go to round one. It's what we do here at TrekRanks. It is our most underrated Deep Space Nine episode. Carlos, what's your pick?
All right. So my 5 words are: a transporter accident created 2. The hashtag, I'm going out in a blaze of glory. And my episode is from season 3, Defiant.
All right.
So it's number 73 on TrekRanks. So I don't know what's wrong with you.
No. Hold on. I'm going to quickly defend this. I've looked at this. I had basically up until the 80s is all A scores, A or A plus A or A minus. There are so many freaking good episodes of it's impossible to not have 80 that high. So there's a lot of good ones ahead of it, but I love the Defiant, and it's an A in my book, and it's underrated. Go.
All right, sure. Okay. Now that we're out of that, I think that this episode is like a truly, truly fabulous example of the best of Star Trek in the 90s, right? And partly is because, one, it's a phenomenal episode. It's just a great, fun episode if you take it in isolation. But from the point of view of continuity, we were talking about world building just a second ago. We were talking about how big the universe, the Star Trek universe can be. This, to me, is like MCU level connections of Star Trek, right? Basically, you have an episode that revolves around a character that was introduced in Next Generation, in another great episode of another series, that hooks up with a band, with the Maquis, with the band of rebels / terrorists that serve as a key plot point on both DS9 and Voyager, that goes hunting for a fleet of ships that will eventually serve as a key plot point in the upcoming Dominion Wars. And it's just like your head explodes. It's just incredible. And it's just, to me, Defiant is, it's one, as an episode, it works. Everything about it works. Thomas Riker, Will Riker, Jonathan Frakes, everything about it just works beautifully. It has great effect shots. It's a fun story. The whole having to team up with the enemy to hunt one of your own storyline is incredibly compelling. So everything about the episode, if you look at the episode just as a 44-minute piece of entertainment, works. But when you look at the episode as a little thread in this large, when in the submission policy for the show, one of their big no-nos was always no more pitches about Thomas Riker, because everybody wanted to know. And I just think this episode is an underrated gem of DS9.
You sum it up perfectly. It's brilliant. I love the way you connect it with the MCU as this connective episode for all those other elements of Trek. And Lee, I know you love it because there's some great acutograms and infographics. Yeah,
exactly.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Again, they have this budget, and they're like, what's going on in sort of that nebula area with all these different ships? Oh, well, there it is on that infogram. And you're sitting there yeah, except that's the appearance of sort of Thomas Riker. There's something about that, oh my God, Jonathan Frakes is here. And you start thinking Next Generation's finished. I wonder if we're going to see maybe a few more kind of characters just swing by Deep Space Nine because they're free of the Next Generation. And unless they're sort of at a convention circuit or appearing in some TV show that week, I'm sure they're kind of going to be available to swing by Deep Space Nine. So I think that was really rewarding as a kid watching this episode. And it's one that I can watch again repeatedly, just that deceptive turn of Riker. There he is, so smooth on the bridge, and then he's kind of pulling the moves on the Hard and Kira, and then he gets out the phaser and he becomes a badass, and when he takes away those sideburns, that is damn good.
Yeah, it's a special episode. And how do they make those infographics so exciting? Because those acutograms are so exciting. All right, Lee, what's your round one pick, your top DS9 underrated episode?
Yeah, so I've gone with 5-word summary. It started out with reunion and hashtag lack of sailing, and that's taking into the wind. So think of it like, I think with season 7, and especially the final 10 episode, I think we always think of the big ending itself. We think of the change of face of evil, the wedding episode. And I find this episode sort of gets kind of lost in between. And I think what I feel makes it underrated is when we think of like the current timeline of like, Voyager, Nemesis, that's kind of the last time we were sort of in that period of time. We got a little bit of a preview of it with Star Trek 2009. But think of the Klingons, one of the most important species in Star Trek history, the canon. Do right that there's going to be someone honorable that the Klingons can get behind and invest in. Ezri Dax, this new character in, so appropriate that Ronald D. Moore wrote this episode. He is basically deconstructing the Klingons that he has built up over his time on The Next Generation. And this is our last time seeing them. And I'm so excited for Star Trek Picard to hopefully find out, what is the Klingon Empire up to these days? How did that kind of end up after Deep Space Nine? I know people talk about, I can't wait to find out about this. What's this going to be like in the future with these sorts of things? I want to see where the kind of Klingons are. And I think this is sort of a fitting finale for the Klingons in 1999, that Gassians. And I just think this is just a fantastic episode that just sometimes just doesn't get the credit it deserves in that final stretch of episodes and final season. I think this is definitely one of the all-time great Deep Space Nine episodes for people like me that love the walking and talking, the politics of the Star Trek universe. I think this episode does incredibly well.
This is how good this episode is. You didn't even mention the incredible part with Kira and the takeover of that Cardassian installation.
Oh God, yeah, it's so tense as well.
It's so well done. They have like the standoff with the guns, and then Damar kills Rousseau, the annoying Cardassian that just can't come around to working with Kira, and it's got that great moment where Damar says something like, what kind of people kill, because they find out they've been obliterating cities. What kind of people do that? And
Kira, Damar, what kind of people?
It was amazing moment.
What kind of state tolerates the murder of innocent women and children? What kind of people give those orders?
Yeah, Damar, what kind of people give those orders?
Incredibly underrated episode. There's no doubt this one gets lost in the shuffle there at the end. Carlos, what's your take?
I think that conversation between Worf and Ezri is one of the best moments for Worf and the entire franchise. When he basically says, "No, you're a part of the House of Martog. Tell us what you really think," and totally deadpan. It's also such a way of making her mark and making her mark on the character and really saying, "I am Ezri, I'm not Jadzia," and her saying that the Klingon Empire is dying and I think it deserves to die is just phenomenal. And to your point about it being written by Ron in like that stretch of 10 episodes. It's a phenomenal pick, and I cannot believe how much happens in that episode. You can't. It's hard to imagine that it's actually 44, or not imagine, but like come to terms with the fact that it's only 44 minutes.
Yeah, it really is dense in terms of how much happens in that episode. All right, let's close it out with my number one pick, and I am going to close out my unintentional, but at the end it was kind of intentional. I did do this. All of my picks are from season 2. It just kind of worked out that way. So my number one underrated Deep Space Nine episode, 5 words and a hashtag. Twisty reveal is sad, poignant. Hashtag Kaiopaka is the hero we need. And it is the collaborator from Deep Space Nine, season 2, episode number 24. I actually have it ranked pretty high on TrekRanks, number 48. I love this episode. It's everything in terms of politics and intrigue and how deep and tense it is. And I know that a lot of people don't rate this episode. I think they forget about it. And I know a lot of people don't like Vedic Barile. We are Team Barile here at TrekRanks. I got no issues with Barile. So one of the things, though, that I think this episode does so amazingly well is the world building that it does for Bajor. So you got Kira versus Wynn, and this is one of her. This is, I think, her maybe third appearance. I think she was in the Circle trilogy as well, but it's her first time back on the station since In the Hands of the Prophets. So everyone's on edge when she shows up. She plays it super nasty and deceitful, but cunning and smart. But they have this whole election going on, this world building of the Kai, which you'd kind of forgotten about from season 1 with Kai Opaka dying. And you think it's going to be Vedic Barile. And the way they build this story, so it ends up being Barile was in part of this group that covered up this betrayal of a death of a bunch of innocent Bajorans to save a bunch of other Bajorans that was led by Kai Opaka, and he had to protect her. It's really amazing how deep that gets. And I love the double switch at the end when you kind of think that Barile can't be a collaborator. Then you find out that he is, but then you find out that he didn't really do it. He did it just to protect Kai Opaka because it was Kai Opaka. I love it. It's a great Odo and Kira team up episode. And by the way, this is also the first episode where it's the one where the producers talk about that moment where they realize that Odo was in love with Kira. So whatever you think of that storyline, this is the one where she mentions that she loves Barile, and the response that Renee Auberjonois gave on screen is what hit the writers to say, oh, yeah, he loves her. And we get that now. So great episode, totally underrated in my book. Lee, what's your take on the collaborator?
This is one I haven't seen in so long that I can't remember when I last checked out. But I now feel, hopefully, this is probably the job of TrekRanks is I really need to go definitely revisit that.
I think you will be surprised by how intense and deep it is and how layered it is for the Deep Space Nine world building. Carlos, how about you, man?
Show, but it's almost like a bottle show. And because there's not a lot of big set pieces, and it happens so late in season 2, but it comes after episodes like Blood Oath and The Wire and Crossover and all these big, massive DS9 episodes, and it comes right before the Jem'Hadar. So it's like sandwiched in these
totally
set pieces. So it's totally forgotten, but you are correct in that it's an amazing episode from the point of view of intrigue and Bajoran politics. It's the episode that solidifies Wynn as the villain that we will get to know, right?
Yep.
And just talk about season 2, maneuvering the pieces. This is very easily forgotten, but one that people should 100% go and revisit. In fact, I watched it for the first time in a long time, maybe about a year ago, and it was one of those that I was like, wow, this episode is amazing, and I can't believe that it's not in my regular repertoire of episodes that I revisit.
Yeah, it's a lot of talking. It's a lot of there's no action, so it stands out.
Totally.
All right, let's jump into some secondary systems picks. Anything that just missed your list, Lee?
Yeah, so at 5, I had for the production design element, I went with the wardroom. I just love that place.
Yes, I love that. I want to hang out there.
For performance and actor on screen, I've gone with Enrique Muniz, the character from The Ship and Hard Time. One of the few Spanish-speaking characters we ever got in Star Trek. Loved that. For three, the wild card pick, I went with so this was controversial. So a bit of an aside. I'm sure most of the listeners to this kind of podcast got it. But in the episode, I think it was, what was Higher Ground? There was a part cut out where they went, the Republic of Ireland and the Northern Ireland unified and became one place. And we basically had a United Kingdom with Republic of Ireland integrated back in. So in the episode of The Explorers, Julian Bashir and Miles O'Brien sing Jerusalem, which is this English cricket song that's like a semi-English national anthem that I refuse to believe someone like Miles O'Brien and especially Colm Meaney would sing. But I justify in my head by saying that it's such deep dive canon that because they're this part of the united kingdom without the whole separation of Ireland, that Jerusalem is an acceptable song to people like that from Ireland now. So that is my deep dive pick.
A lot can change in 300 years.
Exactly. Well, we'll probably still be trying to negotiate Brexit at that point. Yeah. At number 2, my character, I've gone with Borath from The Search Part 2, that we had a bit of a rough introduction to the characters of the Vorta in kind of the Jem'Hadar. You know, it was an okay introduction, but someone like Borath comes along and he nails that used car salesman style that they really wanted for the Vorta. And I think he sets it up as like the first proper introduction to what the Vorta could be. And my sort of...
Okay, hold on. I love this pick because that's Dennis Christopher, who is the star of Breaking Away, who was the son of Paul Dooley in one of my all-time favorite movies. So I love that connection. Keep going.
And finally, my number 1 sort of second pick is Heart of Stone. So it kind of ties into what you said earlier on. This is like the companion piece to your choice. So we have like the first proper sign of like a proper Deep Space Nine love interest kind of here. We've had some sort of flirtations with the idea of Julian Bashir and Jadzia Dax, which in sort of this mythical season 8, you know, this is the start of his journey, and I think the idea of seeing him crying and begging to Sisko is one of the all-time greats. And you know, we have 2 huge plot lines here that pay off for the rest of the series.
I love that pick for Nog. It's amazing. The B story on that is just incredible. Carlos, how about you, man? What just missed your list?
Well, like I said originally, I knew pretty much exactly what talk about. So I pretty much didn't think too much about secondary systems, but I did have 3 quick ones. One is that I did almost pick Keiko O'Brien because I don't think Keiko gets the love that she deserves, right?
Love it.
I love what Keiko represents. I love Keiko with Kira. I love Keiko with Bashir. I think she's a great underrated character and went such a long way to, you know, making the O'Brien character more interesting, but also showing us that, like, in the 24th century, you know, things about relationships don't change. We're still ultimately humans. And
full disclosure and spoiler alert, Keiko O'Brien was our number 1 underappreciated character a few episodes ago when we did our underappreciated characters. All right, what else you got?
And then I did have 2 episodes. So everything else I knew pretty much. I knew I wanted to talk about Runabouts. I knew I wanted to talk about Kane. I knew that my Dabo round was going to be about the inside jokes. But when it came to episode, I thought about both, in addition to Defiant, Civil Defense, which I love.
Underrated.
So underrated, right?
But then is that not a rated episode these days? Like, this is the problem.
Fair. It's fair. It might have gotten to that point.
Maybe. Yeah, okay. I think Civil Defense is a phenomenal. Everything about that episode just works. Talk about the nooks and crannies that you were referring to of Ops. And my other episode is Treachery, Faith, and the Great River. Yeah. It's one of my favorite Nog episodes. I think the Nog O'Brien dynamic in that episode is amazing. I love the fact that Nog is Starfleet now, but he's still Ferengi, so he's like truly being, you know, a Ferengi in Starfleet with all his deals, and like it's just a phenomenal comical episode. But then it's also incredibly heartfelt with the whole Weyoun, you know, Weyoun and Odo. So it's truly like underrated gem in season 7.
It surely is. I will just say, by the sheer number of times that episode has been mentioned on TrekRanks, I'm pretty sure at this point it is not underrated. But obviously, in the eye of the beholder, it's a fantastic episode, and probably still doesn't get the credit that the level it's at. Okay, just going to rattle off a few here really quick. My toughest cut was definitely Necessary Evil, and I kind of went on about it a little bit when I was talking about season 2, but I just love the fact that there's a flashback here where Odo meets Kira and Quark and Dukat, and this is so much going on. It's ridiculously good. It also is a collaborator episode that sets up the collaborator really well. I also think Damar's arc from being a glorified extra to the leader of Cardassian dying as a hero is really underrated. My production design element that I really almost picked was the DS9 wormhole special effect. That thing just stands the test of time. It's cool. It's unique. Just looks awesome. From the character standpoint, I had Shakar. I love Shakar. And I also had the Vulcan Sakona from the Maquis. I love that Vulcan gunrunner that Quark is working with. And I also had Nicole DeBear. I think she's underrated. And, of course, I mentioned Paul Dooley earlier as well. I was going to say my special shout-out was going to be One Little Ship, but that got mentioned. So I think we're good. I knew this was going to be a super interesting topic, and we'd unearth some great deep cut picks, which we did. Awesome job, you guys. So now let's get into our regeneration cycle and go through some quick stats and recap our picks.
Computer, activate regeneration cycle. Alcoves beta and gamma.
All right, so just a quick recap of our picks. Carlos, run down your 5 picks.
So for my number 5 production design pick, I picked the Starfleet Runabout. For number 4, for underrated performer, I picked Tony Todd. So for my Dabo round pick, I chose the inside joke of self-sealing stem bolts. For my number 2 pick, the amazing character that is Inabrantane. And for my number 1 pick for my episode is episode 9 of season 3, Defiant.
Love that list. Lee, how about you?
Yeah, so my number 5 production design elements was the Defiant Quarters. Number 4 performance and actor, that was Juliana McCarthy as Mila Garrick. Number 3 wildcard Dabo round, that was the War infographics. Number 2 Sub Commander Tarul, and number 1 Tacking into the Wind.
Awesome deep cuts there. All right, my 5 were production design element, round 5. I had the Ops Station for Deep Space Nine. I had the Circle as the episode. My round 4 pick was Terry Farrell as underrated performer. Blood Oath was my episode there. Round 3, the Dabo round, I had the entirety of season 2 Deep Space Nine as my wild card pick, with The Wire being the standout episode. Round 2 for underrated character, I had Lee Nollis from The Homecoming, and my number 1 underrated episode was The Collaborator, also from season 2. So a few quick stats. We had 3 set picks, not too many here. I love that we had 2 Garrick relatives. That's awesome. We had 3 What We Leave Behind episode picks for showcasing some of our picks. And the season by season breakdown was a little skewed because of my tainting it with 5 picks from season 2. But other than that, no season 1, no season 5, but 1 from season 6, 2 from season 4, 3 from season 3, and 4 from season 7 at the end there. So awesome summary. But as we do every week, we once again entered a temporal causality loop. So let's jump into that now.
The Enterprise has been caught up in a temporal causality loop, and I suspect that something similar may have happened to you.
And for this week's temporal causality loop, we're going to go all the way back to episode 60 in our top 5 scenes on location. That actually wasn't that far ago. That's only 4 episodes with a voicemail that we got. And I tried to listen to his name and find his Twitter account, but I could not find it. And I'm pretty sure he sent me a note as well, but I couldn't find it. It's from Mark Felisa, is the best I could make out, at JQA124, but that Twitter handle did not work. So, Mark, if you're out there, definitely reach out to me again on DM. So maybe we can talk about getting you on the show, because I love this voicemail. So here we go.
Hello, this is Mark Flessa calling in for TrekRanks episode 60, Top 5 Scenes on Location. You can follow me at Twitter at JQA124. And I just want to list my top 5 locations. Number 5, Riker, my 5 words are Riker in a booby trap, hashtag good tea, nice house, and this is Rana 4, Kevin and Rishon Uxbridge's house in Malibu, California, and the episode is from TNG The Survivors. I just really like this location. I think it's cool. It looks like a futuristic house. My number 4 pick in the 5 words is I lost a brother once, and the hashtag is Mid-Century Outdoor Masterpiece. It is the Deneva colony that was filmed at the TRW Space and Defense Park that was featured in Operation Annihilate. I remember the first time I saw this episode as a kid, and I remember thinking, how could they afford to make this amazing giant set outside, with all these different buildings and statues and things? And it was only years and years later did I learn that that was a real place, and it just happened to fit in perfectly with the original series' mid-century design. My number 3 pick, the 5 words are 318 days of shore leave, hashtag the Shire in space, and this is the Baku village that was filmed at Lake Sherwood in Star Trek Insurrection. As my hashtag said, the Shire in space, I remember watching The Fellowship of the Ring when it first came out. I'm a huge Tolkien fan, and it's just showing the idyllic nature of the Shire and the Hobbits. And I remember thinking, this is like the Shire version of the Baku village. That sequence, the opening sequence of Insurrection, where it's just going through the Baku village and the surrounding countryside and the people enjoying their beautiful surroundings. My number 2 scenes on location is Looking for Nikki the Nose, hashtag Watch Your Caboose and Dump the Broad. This is the Dixon Hill restaurant filmed at the Los Angeles Union Station restaurant in Star Trek First Contact. I just love the look of this set or on location area. It just captures the mood of Dixon Hill so wonderfully in that 1920s and 30s atmosphere. Just love it. And my number 1 pick, the 5 words are Just a Little Hero Worship, hashtag Not Detecting Any Leak. And this is the future site of the Zephram Cochrane statue, filmed in the Angeles National Forest in the San Gabriel Mountains. That was featured in Star Trek First Contact. I just love the idea that there's this historic monument which celebrates the most historic event in all of the Star Trek universe. And I would just love to visit that both at the time of the flight along with Geordi, but also I'd love to go as a future tourist and get to see the site and then probably the museum that's there as well and celebrate Zephram Cochrane's first warp flight. Thanks for listening to my list. Love the show, and live long and prosper.
All right, I love the detail that Mark provided there. A long one, but a worthy listen for top 5 scenes on location, one of my favorite topics that we've done recently. So once again, we are clear of our temporal causality loop. So we want to thank everyone for sending us your great responses to the TrekRanks podcast. So keep them coming to me at TrekRanks on Twitter, so we can retweet them, but we also want to hear from you. So put together your own list of DS9 Underrateds and send us a list. Let's hear from you. Or give us a call, anything. We want to hear from you. The tricorder transmissions, you can call us at 609-512-5527, 609-512-LLAP. Hopefully we'll hear from you so you can be featured on the next episode of TrekRanks. And on the next episode of TrekRanks, we're going to go pretty deep and philosophical by picking our top 5 villains who weren't actually villains.
Oh, that's good.
Ooh. I'm loving this topic. So, yeah, what do you guys think of this? Carlos, Lee, if you had to pick a Trek villain that wasn't actually a villain, anybody jumping out at you?
Thomas Riker.
Thomas Riker. That's a great one. Yes, for sure, from the Defiant. That's good. Lee, how about you?
Oh.
Say Ducat, Lee. Say Ducat.
Oh, I don't know. I'm sitting there thinking I want to say something controversial, like, is it Catherine Janeway or something? I don't know.
You could say Khan.
I you know what you need to do? I will send you a voicemail with some answers.
I love it. That's fantastic. Send us your list after we air that episode.
Eddington
could be a pick. You got to just justify it. I love Eddington, but I would never pick him. Actually, maybe I would. I don't know. I'm brainstorming now. It's going to be a tough one. All right. So before we wrap it up, a huge thanks to Carlos Miranda and Lee Hutchison. Hutch, I love that. I'm going to start calling you Hutch. I can't believe I didn't think of that before. That is perfect. Great to have you guys on the show. Any final Trek subspace communications from either one of you that you guys want to rattle off here, Carlos?
I would like to note that even though I don't have an awesome Scottish accent, both Lee and I are in Scotland right now.
That's right.
And you're in the U.S., which is kind of cool. I'm usually never in the same country as the other person speaking, so it's nice.
Yeah, actually, I try to match up the UK with you because the time zones are so difficult to work out. All right, Lee, hope you had fun, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. It's one of my favourite Star Trek podcasts, and it's been a pleasure to chat with you today, Jim, and Carlos about Deep Space Nine, and hopefully you'll have me again in the future. Thanks.
I appreciate you guys staying up late. All right, I want to thank everyone for engaging with us again here on episode 64 of the TrekRanks podcast. As always, I want to close by saying I'm looking forward to standing with you again here in this place where I belong.
How long has this bird been dead? It appears to have been lying in the sun for quite some time.
Well, it's not dead, it's been replicated, and you do understand that we cook most of our foods.
Yes, I was told to prepare for that. I shall try some of your burned, replicated bird meat.
Just want to remind everyone again that the entire TrekRanks catalog is available for you to download and listen to at TrekRanks.com and on your podcast player of choice. Our episodes never get carbon dated, so check out the topics you've missed and maybe just want to listen to again over at TrekRanks.com. And a reminder to check out our friends 5-Year Mission at 5yearmission.net. They're writing a song for every episode of Star Trek, and you won't believe how great their music is. They also have a podcast at the Trek Geeks Network, so seek them out. You won't regret it.
You must be Will Riker.
I must be.
Calvin Hutchison. Call me Hutch. Calvin, awful name. I've never forgiven my parents. Soon as I saw you, I knew you had to be the Enterprise's first officer.
Oh?
Oh, of course. Your reputation precedes you. Flashing blue eyes, square jaw, quite the ladies' man, I hear. Now, don't be modest, Will.